I can take this. And open it up too. Check, 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 check. Well, good evening, good evening, good evening to everyone that's out there and on the internet line. It is great to be back here once again, and this is Michael Jefferson on Block Sports. So great, glad, wonderful, great time to be here in the city. And I tell you what, I had an absolutely fabulous Thanksgiving. Had a chance to spend it with family. Enjoyed myself with my family down in the state of Mississippi, and it was absolutely wonderful. It was a great time that I had, and wow, just to be able to be with family, had a chance to see a few friends at the same time, and any time that you can just get away to unwind, I can't say enough about that. And my wife had a chance to get away and unwind. I did a small amount of work. My wife was going to do some work, and she said, you know what? Nope, not doing anything. And she said, I'm going to kick back, and I am going to thoroughly enjoy myself. And that's exactly what we did for once. We decided to get away, enjoy family, and just enjoy our time. And I am so thankful for being able to do just that. And anytime you get a chance to get away, do it. Life is too short. You don't know how much time you have on this earth. And the reason why I say all of that is because you cannot take time and you cannot take things for granted. We take so much for granted. I was talking to a colleague of mine today, and I take the time today just to say thank you. to everyone that is impacting my life one way, shape, form, or fashion. All because you just never know how your life is going to be impacted by someone, or heaven forbid, it might be your last day or their last day, but you just don't know. And this is why I take the time to just say thank you. How much time does it really take just to say thank you? It doesn't take any time whatsoever. But because of sometimes selfishness and sometimes literally just taking things for granted, we just continue to mosey on our way and just expect it to happen. It's going to happen. So why should I say thank you? Why should I take the time to acknowledge that this is occurring or that has occurred? And unfortunately, that's what we do as individuals. We don't take the time to acknowledge any of the things that are existing right now, today. And because of that, folks, take the time. Just take the time to just say, hey, thank you. It doesn't take any effort. And the person you're speaking to, or the person that you're saying thank you to, you don't know what type of effect that will have on someone. All because that person may be having what they consider the worst day of their lives. And when you take the time to say thank you, and they stop and they look at you, you're welcome. You would be surprised at their reaction. And the more I've started doing it, I'm not doing it because I'm trying to get something out of someone just by saying thank you, but I'm doing it out of gratification and appreciation for what that person has actually done. And so I say the same thing to you. I have several individuals. Well, I have a few individuals in my family with cancer at the moment. And one is not doing so well. The other two are coping. And that's why I see us having to just say, look, take the time just to say thank you. Because if you don't, you never know how long this person has on earth and what type of effect that will actually have on them by you saying thank you. So just take the time. I know you're here for Block Sports. I know you're here for me to talk about HBCU sports. I understand all of that. But I just want you to think about just what I'm saying at the moment. Just take the time to say thank you to your kids. Yes, I know they get on your nerves every once in a while. I have 4 of them. And yes, every once in a while, all 4 will dance on that one nerve. But every once in a while, just say thank you. Thank you to them. And that's something that I've truly started doing. And I recommend that as a whole, everyone else start doing the same. Now, since I've said that, let's move forward with Block Sports. And for today, what we are going to do, we're going to first start off talking about the SWAC Championship. And in the SWAC Championship, we will have Prairie View A&M Panthers taking on the Florida A&M Rattlers. So FAMU is making their first trip to the SWAC championship after only being in the SWAC for just 3 years. So congratulations to them for making their way to the SWAC championship. This is Prairie View's first time in the last 4 years. Jackson State were here the last 2 years. And Prairie View, last 2 years. I apologize. Because Prairie View was here just a couple of years ago. And now they are back. So congratulations to Prairie View to making it back to the SWAC championship. And this year, they're taking on, as I said, Florida A&M. Now, we've had a few teams to make it here, but not get out of the SWAC championship game. But this year, we're going to see whether or not Prairie View can get out of the West. However, they have a very formidable foe in the Rattlers of Florida A&M. Florida A&M has essentially made it through everyone in the conference. And as a matter of fact, we're going to go through the schedules, and I'm not going to say whether the first outcome between those two teams. But what's going to happen is that I'm going to talk about their schedule and how they actually got here. And with that being the case, let's go ahead and take a look at how they actually got here. And there you have the schedule for Prairie View A&M. And as you can see for Prairie View, they went 6-5 total. And if you notice on the far right-hand corner, you will see their win-loss record, and you will also see their conference record. And for the most part, what has happened, you will also see the results of all of the games that they played. And the first game, of course, that was the great game against Texas Southern, 37-34 for their first conference win. And then, of course, they played Abilene Christian. Of course, unfortunately, they lost their next two to Abilene Christian as well as SMU. And they lost to Abilene Christian, which was not expected, by a score of 45-16. And SMU just took them to task, defeating them by a score of 69-0. But then here comes Alcorn, conference game, ending up winning that game 23-20. Next, Grambling ended up losing that game by a score of 35-20. In rolls Mississippi Valley State, coming out of that game a victor by a score of 31-12. Next, Houston Christian. Unfortunately, they ended up losing that game by a score of 30-20. And here come the Rattlers. They had to travel to Florida A&M. And as you can see, the Rattlers of Florida A&M did not take that much pity on them, defeating them by a score of 45-7. But after that loss, as you can see, Prairie View won their next 3 games. And this enabled them, after the loss to Florida A&M, this enabled them to be able to put themselves in first place, as well as put them in a position where they could go on to face Florida A&M for the SWAC championship. Now, as we were going over the results and we're talking about how teams got to where they are, let's take a look to see how did Florida A&M get to the SWAC championship. Now, before I go there, I have always said whoever wins the Orange Blossom Classic, or whoever wins the game between Jackson State and Florida A&M in the East, has a hand up on who will win the East Division crown. And for the past 3 years, I have been correct. Jackson State won it the last 2 years. They actually beat Florida A&M 3 years in a row. But the last 2 years, they defeated Florida A&M to advance to the SWAC championship game. And this year, Florida A&M defeated Jackson State. And, of course, the rest is history. So let's just go ahead and take a look at the results. And as I said, here you go. They defeated Jackson State by a score of 28-10. And in that, and in that particular game, I can tell you one thing. I was listening to that game, and they essentially blitzed Jackson State the first half of that game. Jackson State did not know what hit them. Florida A&M hit them left, right, and sideways. And they, being Jackson State, the Jackson State Tigers, did not know left from right, up from down, because Florida A&M hit them so many ways until they couldn't recover in that game. They tried. They had a couple of opportunities, but they squandered them. But at the same time, on this day, when they played Jackson State on September 3rd, Florida A&M was the better team. So let's go ahead and continue with the scores for Florida A&M. And as you can see, they played a really tough game against South Florida, losing to South Florida by a score of 38-24. Next, they defeated West Florida by a score of 31-10. And after losing to South Florida, if you notice, Florida A&M went on to win all of their games. The only game that they lost to was a non-conference game against South Florida, which they traveled to South Florida, and granted, they lost by double digits, but it was a very respectable game against South Florida, where they lost by a score of 38-24. And as you can see, all the way down the list, no issues. And the most they gave up in terms of points was 28 points and 38 points to Alabama A&M, which was a conference game, but then they gave up 38 points to South Florida. And that really says a lot about their defense and what the defense for Florida A&M is able to do. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, let's take a look again at Prairie View and what their defense is possibly made up of. And if you notice, in the loss to Abilene Christian, SMU, those were high points scored by the other team. Grambling, in defeating Prairie View, scored 35 points. Houston Christian and Florida A&M against Prairie View scored over 30 points. Now, the question is, now with the last three games, those were conference games, though. In those last three games, you see the maximum points they gave up were 21 points. But two of those three games, they only gave up 14, while the offense put up as many as 38 points, but they also scored 21. Not bad. Not bad at all. And if you notice, in the games that they won, 21 points is the least amount of points that was scored in a game that was won by Prairie View. Now, the question is, will Prairie View be able to hold their own? It's always tough to beat a team twice. And there have been on some occasions where, especially in basketball, where you play each team 3 times. But especially in football, it's a really tough and tall task to beat a team twice in a year. And that's what I'm seeing. That's what I say is going to happen, is that Florida A&M is going to have to beat Prairie View twice this year. But let me check my phone one more time, and I'll tell you why I'm checking my phone. Is because as of today, it was stated that there is going to be some really bad weather on Saturday. And right now, it's still scheduled to have bad weather, thunderstorms scheduled for that day. And if we're scheduled to have thunderstorms on that day, my question is, who is it going to benefit? Now, I can say this. Prairie View was not able to stop at all Florida A&M. And since they were unable to stop Florida A&M at all, the question is, will they be able to stop them this time? The quarterback passed for 272 yards in that game. 272 yards. And as I said, my question is, will they be able to stop Florida A&M? Will Prairie View be able to stop Florida A&M in the game on Prairie View's side? Their quarterback was only able to throw for 93 yards. Not a good day. Not a good day at all. Their running back was only able to rush for 60 yards. And so for Connolly, the quarterback for Prairie View, he must have a much better day. The running back, Johnson, must have a better day for Prairie View. If they're not able to, if one or the other is not able to have a good day, Florida A&M is ready to punch their ticket today to go to the Celebration Bowl and face the Howard University Bison. And I can tell you right now, my son is a graduate of Florida A&M. He has already booked his reservation for Atlanta, Georgia, where the Celebration Bowl is to take place, and the winner of the SWAC championship game is supposed to face Howard University. But a lot of alums, let me tell you folks, a lot of alums from Florida A&M have already booked their reservations, let me tell you, to Atlanta, Georgia. They have already prepared. They already believe. They're saying, well, we already know what the results are going to be, because Florida A&M defeated Prairie View by a score of 45-7 in the first meeting. And then the first meeting happened just a month ago today, just 4 weeks ago. So it was not as if that was the first part of football season. This was in the last quarter of the football season, the last third of the season. And can you make a lot of adjustments? Yes, you can still make adjustments in the game. But 4 weeks to the day, that's a tall order. Even though, have I seen it happen before? Yes, I have seen it happen before, where you have one team make wholesale adjustments, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, why didn't they do that in the first game? All of a sudden, they're coming out of nowhere, and they're making a big difference. The running game is working. The passing game is working. Their defense is able to stop or slow down the other team. Why weren't they able to do that in the first meeting? Well, all I have to say is this, folks. This game is going to be very interesting, because the rain playing on a muddy field is a great equalizer. Sometimes the quarterback is unable to pass the ball as well as they were accustomed to passing. Sometimes the receivers are not able to catch the ball as well as they used to. The rain is getting in their eyes. They may not be able to see. The running back may all of a sudden And of course, the ball being wet because it's supposed to be raining 75% of the day on that Saturday. There are so many things that can go right for a team and so many things that can go wrong for a team. It just depends on what side of the spectrum you're on. If you're going to be on the side of Prairie View that says, oh gosh, I can't wait to see the rain. The rain is going to be the great equalizer. And it's going to equalize the game for us to be able to compete against Florida A&M. Yes, that is possible. That is altogether possible. Or with the running game that Florida A&M has, does Florida A&M even need to have a passing game? That's my question. Do they need a passing game to be successful? I don't think so. I think their running game, because of their offensive line, will open the holes all day long, pretty much, for their running back. And it'll be interesting to see how well he does. And if I'm correct, I believe on that day, now don't get me wrong, on that particular day, the highest rusher, he only rushed for 63 yards, just 3 yards more than Johnson did for Prairie View. But when you have a quarterback that's throwing for 272 yards, do you need to have a big running game? Not really. But but the one thing the Rattlers have done all year long, they have been very successful in passing the ball all game long. The one game where they were not very successful, they won. They played Mississippi Valley State. He was only able to pass, Musa was only able to pass for 155 yards against Mississippi Valley, even though the score was 31-7, Florida A&M victory. And also against Bethune-Cookman, their arch enemy, their arch rival. They were only able to score, Musa was only able to pass for 150 yards. And at the same time, they didn't get that many yards on the ground. But what you have more than anything else is they are going to see whether or not they can pound that rock and make sure that they're able to get that ball across the finish line, get that ball across the goal line, and score as many times as they possibly can, again, against Prairie View. But the one thing I have to say is that Coach Bubba McDowell, I'm almost certain, he's going to have a couple of things up his sleeve. And I can't wait to see what he's going to do and what he's going to bring out in that game. It's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting, folks. I'm sorry. I can't wait. All I know is that this is going to be a very good game. And I'm waiting to see the outcome of what's going to transpire in this game. It's going to be a fun game to watch. And all I have to say is, folks, make sure that you watch that game. As a matter of fact, let me see exactly what time this game is scheduled to take place. And this game is scheduled to take place at 3 o'clock Central Standard Time, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that is going to be, in some cases, that will be kind of a late game. But as I said, this game is going to take place at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time, 4 p.m. So I will make sure my schedule is clear at 4 p.m. Since I live in the Eastern time zone, I'll make sure that my schedule is clear at 4 p.m. so I can watch the game, because it'll be coming on at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And all I have to say, folks, get your popcorn. If you're not going to the game, just be ready for a hard-hitting game. If it rains, Oh, yes. The running game is going to be relied upon by both teams. So all I have to say, folks, get your popcorn, get ready. It's going to be a nasty, wet, sloppy game. I may be wrong. But I think it's going to be one of those games that if the running game is not working, the passing game may not be working, it's going to be a long day. And with all of that being said, now I want to go ahead and move forward to something else. Because guess what? Even though we've been talking about football all this time, it's time for basketball season. And since basketball season is here, I just want to hit some of the standings for 4 of the 5 HBCU conferences out there. And when next week roll around, I will make sure I go through all of the games that were played, the upcoming schedule, and the standings. But this week, even though I will cover the SWAC championship game, and depending on how much time I have, that's my goal, is to make sure I cover all 5 conferences, talk about the standings, as well as the games being played and upcoming games. But unfortunately, I will not be at the SWAC championship game. But I will be at the MEAC SWAC Cricket Wireless Celebration Bowl. And I intend to have fun. And as a matter of fact, my wife is planning on going with me and going to the game. And most of the time when my wife does go, she actually works with me. Because she started working with me back in 2008. So she's always been there. She's always been an assistant. She's always worked with me. Times when I was not able to do certain things, she took it upon herself to take the lead, because she's always been there. She's always been my rock. And anytime you have someone that you can depend on, be thankful. And I'm very thankful for my wife. And all I have to say to you is always say thank you. Now, with all of that being said, let's go ahead and move forward and take a look at the CIAA and look at the standings. And I'll have more concrete information for you in terms of player information, coach information, and where these teams are looking to go and how well we think they're going to play later on during the season. Now with the CIAA, as you can see, no team currently and no conference currently. Let me come back here. No team or no conference has started in conference play. So all of the games and all 4 conferences, you will see no conference games, no conference standings, but you will see their overall record and where they stand with their overall records. But as of today, no conference games have been played. Some conferences will start conference play in the month of December, which will start in a couple of days. But that will be more than likely in the middle part of the month, or closer to, or after Christmas. But as of right now, no conference games have been played as of yet in any conference. So let's go ahead and take a look here. As you can see with the CIAA, and we're going to start with the women's standings here. And as you can see, based upon where they are, and of course, as I said, no conference games have been played, you have Virginia State sitting on top overall with a 5-0 record, followed by Virginia Union, Bluefield State, Elizabeth City, and Lincoln with only 1 loss within their overall record. Of course, Lincoln has only played 3 games, as well as Elizabeth City, but at the same time, of that, they've only lost 1 game. But in the Northern Division, as you can see, look at Bowie State. They're 4-2. So every team in the Northern Division for the women have a great winning record and a great percentage at the same time. This is great. This is a great start for every team in the Northern Division for the women in the CIAA. But let's take a look at the Southern Division for the women. Now, in the Southern Division, not exactly the same, because you have Fayetteville State, Shaw, St. Augustine, and Claflin, all with only one loss. But then you have Winston-Salem. They still have a winning percentage, and they have a winning record up to this point. They are 4-3. But right behind them is Johnson C. Smith, only with 1 win and 3 losses. And Livingstone is yet to play, based upon the information I was able to glean from the CIAA's website. And more than likely, they will probably start their season when conference play begins. And there's always that possibility that they may play maybe a game or two prior to conference play beginning. Now let's take a look at the men's standing for the CIAA. And as of the men, here you are. You have Virginia Union this time instead of Virginia State, sitting on top of the division. Virginia Union with a 4-4 overall record, followed by Elizabeth City with a 3-4, and Lincoln with a 3-4 record. Bowie State and Virginia State, they both come in at 2-3, and following in the end, you have Bluefield State with a 1-5 record in the Northern Division. Now in the Southern Division, you have Claflin on top, 2-0, only playing 2 games so far. Johnson C. Smith is 3-1, followed by Winston-Salem State, St. Aug, Shaw, and those 3 teams, they only have 2 losses. But Winston-Salem is 5-2. St. Aug has 3 wins, followed by Shaw with 2 wins. But Fayetteville State is 2-5, and Livingstone is 0-2. And hopefully when they get into conference play, it's always a bad thing. I always hate to see you have a team that hasn't won a game. I remember in conference play, and I remember a while ago, a few years ago, Mississippi Valley State in the SWAC, they were not successful in some play in terms of winning and in terms of some of their scoring. But they eventually won games. So I'm hoping the very same thing occurs with Livingstone men, that they're able to win some games, and also with Livingstone women, even though they haven't played any games as of yet. But the season is young. Now let's move forward to the SIAC, and of course we're going to start off with the women first. As for the women, you have Fort Valley State, 2-2 overall, but you have Savannah State at 3-1. And I apologize, because now with the SIAC, they have started conference play, and the only conference that is doing any type of conference play. And if you notice, Savannah State and Allen, they are 1-1 in conference play, where Fort Valley State is holding down the lead, 2-0 in conference play. But overall, they have a 2-2 record, where Savannah State has a 3-1 overall record. Edward Waters is following up with the 1 win in conference play, 2-3 overall. Clark Atlanta is 3-2 overall, but they are 0-1. Notice I said 0-1 in conference play, as well as Benedict and Albany State, not having won a game as of yet. Now in the West, for the women, you have Kentucky State Miles and Lemoyne Owens. They are undefeated in conference play. Kentucky State and Lemoyne Owens are 2-0 in conference play. Miles is 3-0 in conference play, and Kentucky State is 4-1 overall. Miles is 3-1. Lemoyne Owens is 5-2. Now in conference play, you have Tuskegee, Lane, and Spring Hill. they're listed as 1-1 for women's play in conference. But Tuskegee is 3-2. But Lane and Spring Hill, they've only won one game. And Central State is 0-2 in conference play and 1-6 overall. And based upon the way things are going, it'll be interesting to see whether or not Fort Valley State is able to hold on to their conference record and their conference play. Kentucky State last year as well as Miles, but Tuskegee is the team. Tuskegee is the team that everyone is expecting to come out to be a victor in this particular situation. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not they will be successful here in defending their championship, and if they are, much success to them, because they have always had a very good team in terms of what they're able to put on the court. Now, as far as the men go, let's take a look here. Now, for the men, you have on the East, you have Benedict sitting atop the East, and you have Spring Hill sitting atop the West. As for Benedict, they are 6-0 overall, the only team in conference play. This is almost like it was in football. They just went through the conference like a hot knife through butter. But it's still early because, as you notice, they're 2-0 in conference play, but so is Albany State being 2-0. But then you have Savannah State, Morehouse, and Edward Waters, who are 1-0 in conference play. And then you have Allen and Fort Valley State with one victory as well as one loss. But in the overall records, you only have Benedict, Albany State, and Morehouse with winning records. Now, Clark Atlanta is 5-0, but they have not yet to play any conference games, as you can see. Now, as far as the West Division goes, you only have Spring Hill and Lane that are 1-1. In other words, they're batting .500 in conference play. And as far as having a winning overall record, you have Spring Hill as 4-3. Lane is 1-1. Kentucky State is 2-1. Miles is 3-2. As for Lemoyne Owens, Central State, and Tuskegee, they are yet to come up to the 500 mark. And the question is whether or not they'll be able to come up to the 500 mark this year. I know Tuskegee last year. It'll be interesting to see what they do this year. I know the women are going to be tough. Women are going to be very tough. But we'll see whether or not the men of Tuskegee show any type of resiliency and they're able to push forward. Now, let's move forward. And I hate to give this connotation, but in this case, it is relevant. The big boys, the CIAA and the SIAC, they're Division II. The MEAC, and I should say also the GCAC conference, they're NAIA. But the MEAC and the SWAC, you're looking at Division I schools. Now, can a Division II team eventually beat a Division I? Basketball is pretty much one of those few sports that really, depending on the coaching and depending on the style of play, any team can win. Now, in football, yes, Division II teams have defeated Division I teams. Alabama State lost to Miles College this year. Several years ago in Division I AA, Appalachian State defeated a Michigan team at the Big House. So it can happen. Not frequently, but it can happen. Now, as far as the MEAC conference goes, let's take a look. Now, Norfolk State. Those ladies from Norfolk State, look, folks, let me tell you something. Those ladies can play some ball. They can play some ball. I am looking forward to being able to watch these ladies play in the MEAC basketball tournament. I am looking forward to going back this year. Now, of course, last year, and I'm very surprised at this, because as we look at the standings again, you see Norfolk State sitting atop at 6-1. Now, don't get me wrong, Howard University, it's always been the last couple of years Howard and Norfolk State that ends up in the championship for both men and women. But let's just say Howard University women maybe, and I'll discuss that a little bit more in detail next week. But it just may be that the women are playing a tougher schedule this year of Howard University, preparing themselves for March Madness. That could be the case. Hence the reason why, as you can see, the women of Howard University are 1-7, whereas the ladies of Norfolk State happens to be 6-1. Now, the one thing I can say about Norfolk State is that Norfolk State is playing a pretty rugged schedule. And in that schedule, they're playing some heavy hitters, and they are defeating those teams. Drexel is one that they went up to Drexel and defeated the ladies of Drexel University. And because of that, they're preparing and they're ready. They're ready for conference play. They're telling you right now, we don't care what you got. We don't care who you bring for us. We don't care who you have playing against us. We intend to not only be competitive, but we intend to beat you. That's what the ladies Spartans of Norfolk State are saying. We are going to defeat you and come away with the victory. Now, as you can see, they're 6-1. They may not win all of their games, but at the same time, they're letting you know. Either come to play or prepare to be defeated. Now, as far as everyone else in the MEAC for the ladies, Maryland Eastern Shore, Morgan State, North Carolina Central. Those three teams are 3-3 overall, followed by Coppin State being 3-4. Whereas you can see North Carolina Central and Coppin, they lost their last two games. And unfortunately, Howard, Delaware State, and South Carolina State, they've lost their last few games they've played. Howard at least won their second game, but then they lost the last 6. Delaware State and South Carolina State, they are yet to taste any kind of victory. So as I said, I'm hoping that they're able to taste some kind of victory sometime soon. It always hurts me to see a team that's unable to win any games at all. But we'll see whether or not they're successful later on during the year. Now, as for the men, here we are again. You have Norfolk State still on top, and this is the men. You have Norfolk State on top, even though they lost their last game. They're 4-3. North Carolina Central is at 4-4, and after that, everyone else is below 500. You have Howard at 3-4, Maryland Eastern Shore 2-4, South Carolina State 2-5, Delaware State at 2-6, as well as Morgan State. Next, you have, of course, Coppin State, not with a win as of yet. And this is what we're looking at as we move forward. But as the teams continue to play and as they continue to progress, we're just looking for the cream to continue to rise to the top. And in the MEAC, a lot of people are looking at Norfolk State and Howard University to come back again and to be on top of the conference. Now, of course, you only have 8 teams in conference play for basketball. 2 of those teams do not have a football team. Hence the reason why a lot of people made a really big deal about football season and about the MEAC not having enough. But guess what? There are some conferences in FCS that only has 3 teams. So lay off the MEAC. I'm SWAC through and through. But how many times has the SWAC won the Celebration Bowl? Once. And it was questionable. Grambling did win 10-9. And now I'm talking about basketball. I'm talking about football. I understand that. Basketball is pretty much the same doggone thing. Now, we do have some games where the SWAC will play the MEAC in basketball, and we will see how well we perform. Or should I say, the SWAC schools will see how well they perform against MEAC schools in those games. We shall see. The MEAC play a tough brand of, they're tough teams. And we'll see whether or not the quickness and the finesse, and in some cases, in Southern, you do have some teams that play with a little bit of power in the SWAC. But we'll see how well the SWAC will be able to hold their own against the MEAC. Now, and with that being the case, let's now take a look at the SWAC women. Now, as far as the women goes, this would be a really good game between Jackson State, Bethune-Cookman against Norfolk State and Howard University. Oh gosh, if they had that game, if they had those two games, oh gosh, that would be phenomenal. Jackson State against Howard, Jackson State against Norfolk State, Bethune-Cookman, even though Bethune-Cookman was in the MEAC, but Bethune-Cookman against Howard, Bethune-Cookman against Norfolk State. Those two games for each team would be sensational. And if you love sports, I would buy tickets to go to that game. Oh, in a heartbeat. I would buy tickets. But let's take a look at the standings for the women of the SWAC conference. And here you go. And as for the standings, you see the Lady Tigers on top with the 5-1 overall record, and they 5-1. They won their last 2 games. Bethune-Cookman right behind them with a 3-2 record, won their last 3 games, followed by Prairie View and Grambling State with a 3-3 record. But then you have Alabama A&M 2-3, having lost their last game. But then you have Texas Southern, Florida A&M, and Arkansas Pine Bluff and Mississippi Valley, having only tasted victory once. But Alcorn, Southern, and Alabama State are yet to taste victory at all for the women. And as I said, more than likely Southern and Alcorn, because they have always been up to the top. Just like last year, Southern came out of nowhere to defeat the Lady Tigers. And they were able to surprise them at the end of the year. And it just may be, and we'll take a deeper dive into the schedule. They just may be playing a tougher schedule for basketball. Excuse me. And it'll be interesting to see how well Southern, Alabama State, and Alcorn are able to hold up during conference play when they face the Lady Tigers and Bethune-Cookman. It'll be very interesting to see how well those teams perform. And I'll be watching, I'll be paying close attention, making sure that I give you updates on where these teams are playing. And with that being the case, now we're going to take a look at the men's standing for the SWAC. And now, as you can see, you have Prairie View sitting on top of the men, and they have a record of 4-2, followed by UAPB with their record of 4-4, and after that, no other team in the SWAC has a winning record. And you have Bethune-Cookman and Alabama State with a record of 3-4, followed by Grambling with a record of 2-5. Then you have Southern, Jackson State, and Alcorn only tasting victory once. But Jackson State was able to defeat an SEC opponent, which was a very good victory. They won by a score of 73-72. And just to be able to have a victory over an SEC opponent is a great thing. But we'll see whether or not they're able to continue. But as you can see, the next game they ended up losing. But the loss was a very close game for Jackson State. And we'll get all into the nuts and bolts and how these teams are faring and who they're playing and what we expect from each team. And also we will talk about the preseason picks for all of the conferences on next week. And depending on how the championship game goes, I hope to be able to have time. At the very least, I'll talk about that in 2 weeks, preseason picks, and go from there. Now, as we continue on, Florida A&M, Alabama A&M, Texas Southern, and Mississippi Valley State, they are yet to taste any kind of victory here. And hopefully, as I said, for men standing, and hopefully these teams will come upon victories. But I can tell you one thing. Me knowing Texas Southern, oh yes, they will win a couple of games. That's almost a guarantee. Texas Southern will win, and they will be in the top half of the teams in conference play. They may not be in the top half of non-conference play, because Texas Southern has always played a really tough non-conference schedule in preparation for conference play. And if everything holds true, trust me when I say Texas Southern will be there. They will be there. Jackson State hopes to be in the top half as well as Southern. As you can see, Southern University, they are at the bottom of the top half, but they're still in the top half of all of the teams that are playing. Jackson State happens to be at the top half of the bottom half teams, but they've only had one victory. Your schedule, the non-conference schedule, prepares you, especially in basketball, prepares you for conference play and can also put you in a great position for March Madness when it's time after conference play is over. And if you qualify to go to the NCAA tournament, non-conference play and how well you played against the non-conference teams can position you properly. So instead of always being the number 16th seed, the way the SWAC conference has always ended up, instead of always being that 16th seed, depending on how well they play in non-conference play, they can either move up to number 15 or even the 14th seed. I don't know if anyone has ever been a 13th seed. Maybe someone from the MEAC, but I don't. And I may be wrong, guys. I may be wrong, but I don't believe anyone from the SWAC. If so, it would have been either Alcorn or Southern that made it to the 13th seed. But that's something I'll have to check out for later on. All I have to say now is basketball season is upon us. Make sure you support your favorite basketball team. But not only that, with this upcoming game on Saturday, football season is not over yet, folks. So because football season is not over, all I have to say is one thing. Make sure that you continue to watch, that you continue to support, and you continue to make sure that you support your favorite football team, whether it's Prairie View or whether it's Florida A&M. And whichever team it is, make sure you go out and you support that team. Because without your support, trust me when I say, if you don't support them, who else will? And that's what a lot of teams and a lot of schools require and rely on. Because when you watch the other schools, that are in FBS, look how full those stadiums are. When you look at the University of Michigan, when you watch LSU, when you watch Alabama, when you watch Georgia, look at how full those stands are. They are coming in each game supporting their team, regardless of their records. Now, don't get me wrong, the teams that I mentioned, they all have winning records, and they're in the top 10 in the nation for leading the conference and leading in terms of the standings. But in order for our teams to get better, in order for our teams to be able to recruit the guys that's in the trenches that will help our skilled players, we must show our support. And without our support from the alumni base, then what's going to happen, folks, is that why would they want to come? I would not want to show up. I would not want to be a part of a school that doesn't support the university or the athletic department. I would not if I were a player. This is why I personally support the university. This is why I support the athletic department. Because if you don't support the athletic department, that means you don't support the student athletes. Notice I said student first. You have to support the student athletes. They need you. They need our support. So make sure you do. And with all of that being said, folks, it is time to call it a day. And I will come back to you on Saturday, just before the football game starts on Saturday, the SWAC championship game. So I will come to you live with the SWAC pregame show. And I will talk to you about everything that transpired leading up to where these teams are and who do we expect to win the game. And on Tuesday night, I will come back to you discussing the results, how the teams did they come up to expectation, did they play as well as they expected to, and we intend to go from there. So with all of that being said, folks, may God bless you, may God keep you, and stay healthy and stay out of trouble. So have a good night.